22 years old. 3 weeks before my wedding. That's when I found out my fiancé had already married someone else. My own family solution? Hand me over to his unemployed younger brother like I was a returned wedding gift. They thought they were solving their embarrassment. They had no idea they were creating their worst nightmare. I'm Aria. I was 22 when this story began, and I believed in fairy tales. Not the Disney kind, the family kind. The ones where cousins who grow up together are supposed to protect each other forever. Brandon and I had been inseparable since childhood. Same family gatherings, same summer vacations, same dreams about our future together. When our families officially arranged our engagement, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. This was always going to happen, wasn't it? He said, sliding the ring onto my finger like it belonged there. I thought I was getting my safe harbor. My quiet beginning. My forever. The wedding was planned for spring. I had my grandmother's vintage lace dress. The venue was booked. The invitations were ordered. My whole life was falling into place exactly how everyone said it should. 3 weeks before the wedding, Brandon said he had to travel for work. Some conference in another city. He kissed my forehead and promised to call every night. He didn't call. Not once. I found out through Facebook. Have you ever had that moment where your entire world collapses in a single scroll? Where you're looking at your phone and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore? I was scrolling mindlessly, probably looking at wedding inspiration, when I saw it. A photo that made my hands shake and my entire world tilt sideways. Brandon. In a tuxedo. With his arm around a woman in a wedding dress that wasn't mine. The caption read, "Forever starts now, red heart # Mr. and Mrs. Delacroix." Her name was Allison Delacroix. Political family. Old money. The kind of connections that could launch careers and open doors my middle-class teacher's salary never could. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. Brandon looked genuinely happy. Happier than he'd ever looked with me. I called him. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, I saw the photo. 3 hours later, I can explain. But when I called him back, he didn't explain. He just said, Allison understands my ambitions. This connection, it's bigger than just us, Sarah. You'll understand someday. I'm sorry, he said, but his voice was already distant. Already done with me. The families will work something out. And they did. Within hours, both families were in crisis mode. Not because I was devastated, though I was. Not because Brandon had committed the ultimate betrayal, though he had. They were panicking about the optics. You know what I'm talking about, right? When something embarrassing happens and suddenly it's not about the person who got hurt, it's about how it looks to everyone else. What will people think? The deposits are non-refundable. The Delacroix connection could benefit all of us. We need a solution. Aunt Diane looked at me like I was a business problem that needed solving. Just marry Daniel. Daniel. Brandon's younger brother. 24 and living in his parents' basement. The family disappointment. The consolation prize. It keeps everything in the family, she explained. The venues are booked. The guests are invited. We can't waste all this planning. I wanted to scream. Wanted to run. But I was 22 and heartbroken and raised to believe that family knew best. Daniel didn't object when they asked him. He just shrugged and said, yeah, okay. Whatever. The wedding happened exactly as planned. Same venue, same flowers, same vintage lace dress. Just a different groom who showed up in wrinkled clothes and couldn't look at me during the vows. Our first dance was awkward and silent. After the reception, Daniel disappeared into what used to be Brandon's room. I heard the PlayStation turn on at 10 p.m. The sounds continued until 3 a.m. I cried myself to sleep in a king-size bed that felt bigger and lonelier than any single bed I'd ever known. Living with Daniel was like living with a polite ghost. He slept until noon, drank energy drinks for breakfast, and played games until the early hours. When I tried to make conversation, he'd give one-word answers without looking up from his screen. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Like you're just taking up space in someone else's life? How was your day? Fine. Want to have dinner together? Nah. Meanwhile, Brandon would visit with Allison, showing off their designer outfits and European art collection. He'd look right through me like I was furniture. How's married life? He'd ask Daniel with a smirk. Daniel would just shrug. It's whatever. I started staying late at work, grading papers in my empty classroom instead of going home to my empty marriage. Some nights I'd cry so quietly I was sure no one could hear. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday in November when everything changed. I'd been working late again, running on nothing but coffee and stubborn determination. I got home around 9 p.m. and went to the kitchen to find something to eat. I opened the refrigerator, looked at the expired milk and leftover takeout, and felt that familiar wave of exhaustion wash over me. Then my vision went black. I woke up on the kitchen floor with Daniel crouched beside me, looking genuinely worried for the first time since I'd known him. Hey, you're okay, he was saying, helping me sit up. When's the last time you ate something? I blinked at him. This was more words than he'd said to me in weeks. This morning, I think? His face changed. Not anger exactly. Something like guilt. That's not okay, Arya. You can't live like this. He helped me to the couch. Made me a grilled cheese sandwich, the first time I'd seen him use the stove. Sat with me while I ate it, really looking at me for the first time since our wedding night. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I've been a terrible husband. You didn't ask for this either, I replied. No, but I agreed to it. And I've been acting like a child instead of taking care of you. That was the beginning. Daniel didn't transform overnight, but he started trying. He'd emerge from his room earlier, ask if I'd eaten, and offer to cook dinner together. He got a part-time job, then a full-time one doing IT support. One evening, about 6 months after our wedding, Daniel sat down across from me while I was grading papers. I don't know how to be a husband, he said, looking directly at me. I don't know how to be good at this. But I want to learn, for you. That was the first time I saw something in his eyes that wasn't indifference. It was genuine care. Maybe even the beginning of love. I don't know how to be a wife either, I admitted. Not like this. But maybe we can figure it out together. We started small. Cooking dinner together. Watching movies on the couch. Talking about our days, our dreams, our fears. Daniel was funny, I discovered. Really funny. He had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard and made me laugh until my sides hurt. He was also incredibly smart, just unmotivated, not incapable. And he was kind. Not flashy like Brandon had been, but genuinely, quietly kind. He'd bring me coffee in the morning, leave little notes in my lunch bag, and pick up my favorite ice cream when he went to the store. It wasn't the passionate love I'd dreamed of. But it was real. It was growing. It was ours. Brandon noticed the change immediately. At family dinners, he'd watch Daniel and me laugh together over inside jokes. He'd see how Daniel would automatically serve me the best pieces of food, or how I'd light up when Daniel walked into the room. And he hated it. Look at you two, he'd say with false cheer. So domestic. So quaint. I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the way he'd try to undermine Daniel, pointing out his lack of education, his simple job, his modest ambitions. But Daniel didn't take the bait. He'd just smile and change the subject, or find a reason to take me somewhere else. You know that moment when you realize someone actually has your back? When you're not used to being protected, and suddenly someone is quietly, consistently choosing you? He's trying to get under your skin, I said one night after a particularly tense family dinner. I know, Daniel replied. But I'm not going to let him ruin what we're building. Brandon's opportunity for revenge came a year and a half into our marriage. He convinced his aging parents to sign over power of attorney, then used it to restructure everything. Bank accounts, property deeds, including the family home where Daniel and I had been living. I think it's time for some changes, he announced at Sunday dinner, Allison sitting beside him with her practiced political smile. Daniel and Sarah have been living here rent-free for too long. It's time they learned to stand on their own. Aunt Diane looked confused. But Brandon, this is their home too. Actually, Mom, it's not. Not anymore. He slid legal documents across the table. Papers that made it clear, he was kicking us out. You're evicting us, Daniel said flatly. I'm encouraging independence, Brandon replied smoothly. You're 26 years old, Danny. Time to stop playing house and start building real life. The cruelest part wasn't the eviction. It was public humiliation, doing it in front of family who were too shocked to object. But Daniel just nodded quietly. Okay. We'll be out by the weekend. That's when I realized something had fundamentally shifted in my husband. He wasn't the broken boy Brandon thought he was anymore. He was a man who'd found his strength, and he wasn't going to let his brother's cruelty define him. We found a small apartment above a corner grocery store. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. The floors creaked and the heat was unreliable, but the rent was affordable and it was ours. I expected Daniel to be angry, to resent me for being the reason his family had turned against him. Instead, he seemed liberated. It's ours, he said, standing in the empty living room on moving day. No one can take it away. No one can use it to control us. It's just ours. We furnished it slowly with second-hand finds and clearance sales. Daniel worked overtime to cover expenses. I picked up tutoring jobs to help with groceries. It wasn't glamorous. But it was ours. Daniel would bring me flowers from the grocery store downstairs, simple $5 bouquets that meant everything. He learned to cook by watching YouTube videos. We'd talk about everything and nothing while I graded papers at our small kitchen table. I may not have been your first choice, Aria, Daniel said one evening, watching me work by our single table lamp. But I promise I'll be your last mistake. I looked up at this man who'd grown from an indifferent boy into someone who chose me every single day. Who worked hard to provide for our modest life. Who made me laugh and brought me flowers and promised to keep learning how to love me better. You weren't a mistake, I said. You were a gift I didn't know I needed. 2 years later, we received an invitation to Brandon and Allison's housewarming party. Some enormous houses in the suburbs, all marble countertops and crystal chandeliers. Let's go, Daniel said when I almost threw the invitation away. Really? Really. I want them to see what happiness looks like. We went. I wore a simple dress from Target. Daniel wore a shirt he'd ironed himself. We bought a $12 bottle of wine. But we walked into that party holding hands, laughing at Daniel's whispered jokes, completely comfortable in our own skin. Brandon spent the evening trying to impress us with his possessions. The smart home technology, the wine cellar, the custom furniture that cost more than our rent for 6 months. Everything was beautiful and expensive and perfectly arranged. It looked like a magazine spread. It also looked cold. Untouchable. More like a museum than a home. What do you think? Brandon asked, clearly expecting envy. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Very impressive. Brandon was waiting for jealousy, bitterness, acknowledgement that he'd won. Instead, he got politeness and genuine happiness from two people who seemed completely content with their smaller life. As we drove home in Daniel's used Honda, passing our little apartment above the grocery store, I realized something profound. Have you ever had that moment where you understand that the worst thing that happened to you was actually the best thing? When you realize that what felt like the end was really just the beginning? I'd never gotten revenge on Brandon. I'd never tried to hurt him the way he'd hurt me. But I'd done something better. I'd healed. I'd grown. I'd built something real with someone who chose me not because of my connections or status, but because of who I was. Brandon might have started my story with betrayal and abandonment. But Daniel had helped me write the chapters where I chose myself, chose love, chose the quiet happiness of a life built on genuine partnership rather than family obligation. The best revenge wasn't getting even. It was getting better. It was choosing healing over hatred, growth over grudges, love over bitterness. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you clears the path for the best thing that could happen to you. I wasn't the girl they broke anymore. I was the woman who watched them shatter while I built something beautiful from the pieces they left behind.